He threw food stamps on the table at my brother's engagement party and told everyone I was draining his success. What he didn't know was that I'd been sitting in boardrooms approving his department's entire operational budget while he thought I was just sick at home. I was sitting at a white-clothed table in one of those upscale spots in Buckhead where the air smells like expensive cologne and old money, the kind of place where black excellence goes to celebrate itself, where doctors and lawyers and executives fill every corner booth. My hands were shaking under the table, not from fear, but from the chill of the chemotherapy that had finished only 4 hours earlier at Emory. I had a silk scarf wrapped perfectly around my head, one of the beautiful ones my mama had sent from her church sister in Spellman's alumni group, to hide the thinning patches, but the nausea was a physical weight pressing into my chest. My husband, Terrence, stood up and clinked his glass with the kind of confidence that only comes from a man who thinks he's untouchable. He didn't look at me with the love he'd promised 10 years ago in that little church off Martin Luther King Jr. Drive in southwest Atlanta. He looked at me like I was a stain on his brand-new Tom Ford suit. "I want to make a toast," Terrence announced, his voice booming across the private dining room. Every head turned. My brother Marcus smiled nervously. His fiancée, Simone, sat frozen with her champagne flute halfway to her lips. "To my brother-in-law," Terrence continued, gesturing toward Marcus with his glass. "To a man who actually works for his future. Who shows up. Who doesn't use a little sickness," he made air quotes with his free hand, as an excuse to sit at home and drain the bank account dry. The table went quiet. Not the good kind of quiet. The kind where you can hear your own heartbeat in your ears. Then Terrence reached into the inner pocket of his jacket, the one I had tailored for him last year at a boutique in Lenox Square, and pulled out a small stack of papers. He fanned them out like playing cards, then dropped them onto the white tablecloth right next to my untouched salmon. EBT cards, SNAP benefit applications, old assistance vouchers I'd picked up months ago when I was researching corporate social responsibility programs for work. The sound of the paper hitting the table was louder than a gunshot. My brother's fiancée giggled, a sharp, nervous sound that she tried to cover with her hand. My own brother looked down at his plate like he was studying the garnish. My cousin Janelle, who'd flown in from Detroit for this dinner, stared at me with her mouth open. Terrence's sister, Michelle, who worked in HR at some firm in Midtown, smirked into her wineglass. "Maybe this will help you get through the week, baby," Terrence said, leaning down close enough that I could smell the bourbon on his breath. His voice dropped to a stage whisper, the kind meant to be overheard. "Since you're so determined to be a burden on my success." He straightened up, adjusted his cufflinks, and sat back down. Someone at the far end of the table coughed. A waiter pretended to be very interested in refilling water glasses. I looked down at the vouchers spread out next to my plate. My vision blurred, but not from tears. From the sheer, cold weight of betrayal settling into my bones like the chemo drugs still moving through my veins. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my water. I didn't stand up and curse him out the way my grandmother would have. I just sat there, my hands folded in my lap, and felt the future I thought I had crumble into dust. My name is Venus Wright. I'm 34 years old, born and raised in College Park before I got bougie. 2 weeks ago I had a future. I had a husband who kissed my forehead every morning before work. I had a family who I thought would stand by me through stage 3 breast cancer. I had a life that made sense. Now I had a table full of people who just watched my husband humiliate me in public, and not one of them said a word. Terrence didn't stop after the toast. That was the thing about him. He never knew when to let a victory sit. He had to explain it, perform it, make sure everyone understood how clever he was. "You know what the problem is with some women," he said to Marcus, loud enough for the whole table. "They get a little attention, a little sympathy, and suddenly they think the world owes them something. Meanwhile, the man is out here working 60-hour weeks at Piedmont Holdings, climbing the corporate ladder, building an actual legacy." Piedmont Holdings. The name hung in the air like smoke. I kept my face neutral, but inside, something clicked into place. Terrence worked in regional operations for Piedmont's Southeast Territory. He managed vendor contracts, supplier relationships, logistics coordination across Georgia, Alabama, and South Carolina. He'd been with the company for 6 years, long before I got sick, back when we were still happy, back when he used to brag about me to his coworkers. He had no idea that Piedmont Holdings was a subsidiary. He had no idea that the subsidiary rolled up into a larger corporate structure. And he certainly had no idea who sat on the board of that structure. "Terrence, baby," Sister Michelle purred from across the table, "you're doing amazing things at Piedmont. Didn't you just close that deal with the distribution center in Savannah?" $14 million, Terrence said, puffing his chest. "Largest contract in the region this quarter. My director says I'm on track for VP by next year." Marcus finally looked up. "That's incredible, man. Congratulations." "Thank you," Terrence said. "It's what happens when you show up and do the work. When you don't make excuses." He glanced at me when he said it. Just a flicker, but everyone caught it. Simone cleared her throat. "Well, I think we should get back to celebrating Marcus and me. This night is supposed to be about us." Of course," Terrence said smoothly, raising his glass again. "To the happy couple. May your marriage be built on partnership and mutual respect." The word mutual landed like a slap. I felt my cousin Janelle's hand reach under the table and squeeze my knee. She was the only one. I picked up my water glass with steady hands and took a small sip. The ice was melting. My salmon was getting cold. The scarf around my head suddenly felt too tight. But I didn't move. I didn't react. Because 10 years in corporate strategy had taught me one thing Terrence never learned. The person who talks the most is usually the one who knows the least. After dinner, I took an Uber back to our house in Cascade Heights by myself. Terrence stayed behind with Marcus and the guys to smoke cigars on the patio and talk about football and money and all the things men talk about when they think they've won something. I sat in the back seat of the car and watched the city lights blur past Peachtree, downtown, the highway stretching south toward home. The driver didn't try to make conversation, which I was grateful for. I didn't have the energy to pretend I was fine. When I got home, the house was dark. I turned on the lamp in the living room and stood there for a moment, looking at the framed photos on the mantel. Our wedding day at historic Oakland Cemetery. A vacation in Hilton Head. Last Christmas in matching pajamas, back when I still had hair. I pulled out my phone and opened my texts. 12 unread messages. None of them were from my brother. None were from Simone, or Michelle, or anyone else who'd been at that table. But there was one from Janelle. "V, I'm so sorry. That was fucked up. You need anything?" I typed back, "I'm okay. Thank you for being there." Then I sat down on the couch and let the exhaustion wash over me. Not just from the chemo, from the whole night, from the realization that the people I'd loved and trusted had watched me be humiliated and said nothing. Terrence came home after midnight. I heard his keys in the door, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood. He walked past the living room without looking in, went straight to the bedroom, and closed the door. I stayed on the couch. I pulled the cashmere throw blanket, one I'd bought on a business trip to New York 2 years ago, over my legs and stared at the ceiling. That's when I made the decision. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to scream or throw things, or ask him why he'd done this to me. I was going to do what I'd always done best. I was going to work. Monday morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. Terrence was still asleep, snoring lightly on his side of the bed like nothing had happened. I showered, wrapped a fresh scarf around my head, put on a tailored navy dress that still fit despite the weight loss, and drove myself to the office. Not Terrence's office. Mine. I worked remotely most of the time now because of treatment, but the executive suite was in a sleek high-rise in Midtown Atlanta, just a few blocks from the Fox Theater. I had a key card that opened the private elevator. I had an office on the 14th floor with my name on the door. Venus Wright, Chief Strategy Officer, Crestwood Capital Group. Crestwood wasn't a household name. We didn't advertise. We didn't do press. We acquired mid-sized companies, restructured them, optimized their operations, and either sold them or integrated them into our portfolio. We had 12 subsidiaries across the Southeast. Piedmont Holdings was one of them. When I walked into my office, my assistant, Kendra, a sharp 26-year-old from Spelman who could smell blood in the water from a mile away, was already at her desk with a cup of coffee waiting for me. "Morning, Ms. Wright," she said, standing. "How are you feeling?" "Better," I lied. "Is Lorraine in yet?" Lorraine Hobbs was our general counsel. 58, Howard Law, wore her locks in a crown braid, and had a reputation for never losing. She'd been with Crestwood for 12 years and had personally negotiated every major acquisition we'd ever done. "She's in the conference room," Kendra said. "She said to send you in as soon as you arrived." I nodded and walked down the hall. Through the glass walls, I could see Lorraine sitting with her reading glasses on, a stack of folders in front of her, and a mug that read, "Nevertheless," she persisted. I knocked once and stepped inside. "Venus," Lorraine said, looking up. Her voice was warm, but her eyes were all business. "Close the door." I did. "Kendra told me you needed to talk," she said. "And judging by the fact that you're here at 6 a.m. on a Monday after chemo week, I'm guessing this isn't about quarterly projections." I sat down across from her. For the first time since Saturday night, I felt the tightness in my chest loosen just a little. "I need to understand something," I said quietly. "About Piedmont Holdings, about the regional operations structure, and about what kind of authority I actually have." Lorraine set down her pen. She folded her hands on the table and looked at me with the kind of calm intensity that made her terrifying in a courtroom. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. Lorraine didn't interrupt me once. She just listened, taking notes in her precise handwriting, her face completely unreadable. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and exhaled slowly. "First," she said, "I'm sorry that happened to you. That was cruel, and you didn't deserve it. Thank you. Second," she continued, "let's talk about Piedmont. Terrence works in regional operations under Director Lloyd Michaels. Lloyd reports to the Southeast VP, Greg Timmons. Greg reports to the COO, who reports to our board. You and I both sit on that board." I nodded. I knew the structure. I'd helped design it. "Now," Lorraine said, flipping open one of the folders, "here's what you might not know. 3 months ago, we started getting complaints. Not formal ones, just whispers. Women in the Piedmont regional offices saying they felt uncomfortable, passed over for promotions, dismissed in meetings. One woman in the Alabama office said her supervisor told her she should focus on her kids instead of trying to move into management. My stomach tightened. Who was the supervisor? Lorraine slid a paper across the table. It was an internal HR memo, dated 6 weeks ago. The supervisor's name was Terrence Wright. "There's more," Lorraine said. "We pulled some records. Over the last 18 months, 4 women in Piedmont's Southeast Division have left the company. All of them cited hostile work environment in their exit interviews. 2 of them mentioned Terrence specifically. One said he called her too emotional when she asked about a raise. Another said he told her she should be grateful for her position." I stared at the memo. The words blurred together. "Why wasn't I told about this?" I asked. "Because you were on medical leave," Lorraine said gently. "And because, frankly, HR thought they could handle it internally. But when I heard what happened to you this weekend, and Kendra told me, yes, I asked her to keep an eye on you. I pulled everything we had." She opened another folder. This one was thicker. "Vendor contracts," she said. "Terrence has been signing off on deals with companies owned by his college fraternity brothers. Not illegal, but definitely a conflict of interest. He's also been inflating budget projections to make his department look more profitable than it is. And last month, he charged a $7,000 business dinner at a steakhouse in Buckhead. 12 people. None of them clients." "Let me guess," I said. "His sister Michelle was there." Lorraine nodded. "Along with your brother and his fiancée. The receipt says it was a vendor relations event. But the vendors he listed? None of them were actually in attendance." I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something clearer. "He's been lying," I said. "He's been lying," Lorraine confirmed. "And he's been getting away with it because no one above him has been paying attention. Until now." She closed the folder and looked at me. "So here's the question, Venus. What do you want to do?" I spent the next 3 days in that office, going through everything Lorraine had pulled. Kendra brought me lunch. I took my medication on schedule. I didn't tell Terrence where I was. He texted me once. "Working late again?" I didn't respond. By Wednesday, we had everything. Lorraine had looped in our head of internal audit, a man named Cleveland Patterson, a former FBI forensic accountant who'd moved to Atlanta to be closer to his grandkids in Decatur. Cleveland didn't smile much, but when he walked into Lorraine's office on Wednesday afternoon, he looked almost pleased. Ms. Wright, he said, shaking my hand. I've been in this business 30 years. I've seen a lot of creative accounting. But your husband, he's not even trying to hide it. He spread out a series of spreadsheets on the conference table. Line items highlighted in yellow. Vendor payments that didn't match invoice records. Expense reports with duplicate charges. And then, buried in the back of a Q2 budget file, something else. A wire transfer. $50,000, sent from a Piedmont Holdings vendor account to a personal LLC registered in Terrence's name. That's embezzlement, Lorraine said flatly. That's a felony, Cleveland added. I stared at the transfer record. The date was from April, 2 weeks after my diagnosis. 2 weeks after I told him I was scared, that I didn't know if I'd survive this, that I needed him. He'd been stealing from the company while I was lying in a hospital bed. There's more, Cleveland said. He pulled out another sheet. This LLC. It's co-owned by someone named Michelle Wright. His sister. Lorraine looked at me. Venus, this is your call. We can handle this internally, quietly. We can fire him, make him repay the money and move on. Or, I asked. Or we can report this to the authorities, she said. Corporate fraud. Embezzlement. The Fulton County DA would be very interested in this, especially with the amounts involved. I looked down at the papers, at the numbers, at the evidence of a man who'd stood in front of my family and humiliated me while he was actively stealing from the company I helped build. How long will it take to prepare a full report? I asked. 2 days, Cleveland said. Then do it, I said. And I want a full audit of the entire Southeast Division. Every contract Terrence signed. Every expense report. Every vendor relationship. If there are more people involved, I want to know. Lorraine nodded. And Terrence? Let him keep working, I said. Let him think he's safe. That Friday, Terrence came home excited. I was sitting in the living room when he walked in, his tie loosened, a bottle of champagne in his hand. Guess who just got nominated for Regional Director of the Year, he said, grinning. I looked up from my book. Congratulations. He popped the champagne right there in the kitchen, poured 2 glasses, and brought one over to me. This is it, V, he said. This is what I've been working for. They're announcing it at the Southeast Leadership Summit next week in Sea Island. Greg Timmons himself is going to present the award. He sat down next to me, close enough that I could smell his cologne. I know things have been hard, he said, his voice softening. With your health and everything. But this is going to change things for us. The bonus alone is $90,000. We can pay off the medical bills. We can take a real vacation. You can stop worrying. He reached for my hand. I let him take it. That sounds wonderful, I said. He smiled. I'm sorry about Saturday. I was an asshole. Sometimes I feel like I'm carrying everything, you know? But I shouldn't have said those things. You're my wife. I love you. I know, I said. He kissed my forehead. You're the strongest woman I know. I smiled. I sipped the champagne. I let him think he'd won. If you're still watching this, thank you. If any of this resonates with you, hit that subscribe button. You're not alone. The Southeast Leadership Summit was held at a resort on Sea Island, Georgia, a place where old money and new money shook hands over bourbon and golf. Terrence had been talking about it for weeks. He bought a new suit. He'd practiced his acceptance speech in the mirror. I told him I wasn't feeling well enough to go. He didn't push. What he didn't know was that I was already there. Lorraine and I had driven down the night before. We were staying in a suite on the opposite end of the resort. Cleveland had flown in from a conference in Charlotte. And Greg Timmons, the Southeast VP, the man who was supposed to present Terrence with his award, had been briefed on everything 2 days earlier. The awards dinner was on Saturday night. 200 people in ballroom attire. Terrence sat at a table near the front with Lloyd Michaels and the rest of the regional operations team. He was smiling, shaking hands, playing the part. I sat in the back, near the doors, in a black dress and a silk headwrap. Lorraine was next to me. Kendra was across the aisle with a tablet, ready to pull up documents if needed. Greg Timmons took the stage at 8 p.m. He was a tall man, early 50s, with the kind of voice that commanded a room. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, thank you for being here. Tonight, we celebrate excellence, leadership, integrity. He paused. But before we get to the awards, I need to address something that's come to our attention this week." The room went quiet. "Crestwood Capital Group was built on a foundation of trust," Greg continued. "Trust between our teams, trust with our clients, and trust in the numbers. When that trust is broken, we have a responsibility to act." Terrence's smile faltered. "Over the past 2 weeks," Greg said, "our internal audit team uncovered evidence of financial misconduct within our Piedmont Holdings Southeast Division. Falsified expense reports, vendor conflicts of interest, and most seriously, embezzlement of company funds." Murmurs spread through the room. Terrence's face went pale. "The individual responsible," Greg said, "is no longer with this company as of 5 p.m. today, and the matter has been referred to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution." Terrence stood up. "Wait, what?" "Mr. Wright," Greg said calmly, "I'm going to need you to sit down." But Terrence didn't sit. He looked around the room, his eyes wild, searching for someone to back him up. Lloyd Michaels was staring at his plate. Michelle wasn't there. She'd been quietly terminated 3 days earlier. Then Terrence's eyes found me. I stood up. The room turned. "For those who don't know," Greg said, gesturing toward me, "this is Venus Wright, Chief Strategy Officer of Crestwood Capital. She's also the person who uncovered this entire scheme. And she's the reason we're able to take action tonight." I walked slowly to the front of the room. Every eye was on me. Terrence was shaking his head, his mouth opening and closing like he couldn't find the words. "Venus, baby, this is a mistake," he stammered. I stopped a few feet from his table. "No, Terrence," I said quietly. "The mistake was thinking I wouldn't notice. The mistake was believing that being cruel made you powerful. The mistake was underestimating the woman you promised to love." I turned to Greg. "The full report is with legal. The DA has everything they need." Greg nodded. "Security will escort you out, Mr. Wright." 2 men in suits appeared at Terrence's side. He tried to pull away, but they were firm. "This is insane," he shouted. "She's lying. She's bitter. She's trying to ruin me because I told the truth about her." I didn't respond. I just watched as they led him out of the ballroom, his voice echoing down the hall until the doors closed behind him. The room was silent. Then someone started clapping. Slowly at first. Then more joined in. I didn't stay for the applause. I walked back to Lorraine, picked up my purse, and left. 3 months later, Terrence pled guilty to embezzlement and corporate fraud. He was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison and ordered to repay $127,000 to Crestwood Capital. His sister Michelle took a plea deal and received probation. My brother called me 2 weeks after the sentencing. He apologized. I told him I'd think about it. Janelle and I are closer than ever. She flew down last month and stayed with me for a week while I finished my last round of chemo. The doctors say I'm in remission. I'm still the Chief Strategy Officer at Crestwood. We restructured the entire Piedmont Southeast Division. We hired 3 new women into leadership roles. We implemented mandatory ethics training. And we created a whistleblower hotline so that no one ever has to feel silenced again. I bought a townhouse in Virginia Highland. It's smaller than the house in Cascade, but it's mine. The walls are painted soft gray. I have a garden in the back. I'm learning to grow tomatoes. I don't wear scars anymore. My hair is growing back, short and natural and silver at the temples. I like it. Last week, I got a message from one of the women who'd left Piedmont, the one who said Terrence called her too emotional. She'd heard about what happened. She wanted to say thank you. I wrote back, "You deserve better." We all did. I don't think about Terrence much anymore. Sometimes I see his name in a court filing or a news article, but it doesn't sting the way it used to. He made his choices. I made mine. My name is Venus Wright. I'm 34 years old. I survived cancer. I survived betrayal. And I'm still here. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. If this story meant something to you, please share it. And if you're going through something similar, if someone has made you feel small or invisible or worthless, I want you to know this. You are not a burden. You are not too much. And you are not alone. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you in the next one.